There are days when you wonder if anyone actually notices when you're there. Ava knew that feeling all too well, being present without being seen, taking up space without causing a ripple. The office buzzed around her like it always did, voices overlapping, phones ringing, the constant clatter of keys being pressed in a hurry. But her? She was silent. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the kind that comes from learning it's sometimes safer to keep your words tucked away than to risk them going unheard. Her fingers glided over reports with mechanical precision, while her mind wandered to places no one there could ever imagine. Because the truth was, Ava had built an entire life around invisibility, and she was starting to wonder if it still protected her or just kept her trapped. The building's rooftop was her secret refuge. Few people knew it existed, and even fewer made their way up there. Ava liked it that way. She liked feeling Portland's cold wind pull strands loose from her tied-back hair, liked closing her eyes and listening to nothing but her own breathing, as if that sound were the only proof she was still alive, still felt things, still existed beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. Up there, away from the gazes that passed right through her, she could be honest with herself. She could admit she missed something she couldn't even name. Affection, maybe. Connection. Or simply the feeling that she mattered to someone besides herself. Ava, you spend so much time on this rooftop, it's like some kind of spiritual retreat. Daphne appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing that playful smile she always carried with her. One of these days, you're going to turn into a monk, and I'll have to drag you back to the real world.
Ava smiled slightly, that small smile she used when she didn't want to explain too much. I just need some air, Daph. Air? Daphne walked over, leaning against the railing beside her. Honey, what you need is a life, and it just so happens there's a company gala on Friday. Long dresses, expensive champagne, live music, things normal people do every once in a while. Ava's gaze drifted to the city below, lights beginning to flicker on as the day slowly died. Parties had never been her thing. Not because she didn't like people, but because she always felt like an intruder in her own body at those events, watching everything from the outside, as if she were watching a movie she wasn't actually part of. But there was something in Daphne's voice, in that caring insistence, that touched a vulnerable place inside her. Maybe it was time to stop just watching. I don't know, Daph. I'm not exactly the type who shines at these things. And who says you have to shine? Daphne placed a hand on her shoulder with that tenderness only true friends have. Sometimes we just need to show up, let ourselves be seen, even if it's just for one night. Let ourselves be seen. The words echoed inside Ava like a quiet challenge. How long would she keep hiding behind her own routine? How long would she pretend everything was fine when the truth was she felt like she was disappearing bit by bit, like paint diluting in the rain? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, that automatic gesture she made when insecurity came knocking. But this time, something inside her whispered that maybe it was time to let go. Okay, she said almost in a sigh. I'll go. Daphne broke into a wide smile, the kind that could light up any room. Perfect, because just so you know, I wasn't going to take no for an answer anyway. Ava laughed softly, shaking her head. But while Daphne was already planning out which dress she should wear, Ava looked out at the horizon one more time. The city pulsed below, full of intertwined lives, stories being written every second. And her? She was still trying to find the courage to write the first line of her own. Maybe this party would be the push she needed. Or maybe it would just be another night where she felt invisible. But something inside her, small, almost imperceptible, was starting to believe that this time could be different.
The ballroom was full of beautiful people saying empty things. Ava noticed that within the first 5 minutes. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like captured stars, reflecting golden light onto made-up faces and catalog smiles. The sound of conversations blended with the clinking of champagne glasses, creating an artificial symphony of elegance. She held her own glass like a shield, her fingers gripping too tightly around the delicate stem. The navy blue dress Daphne had picked out for her was beautiful, simple but elegant. Yet Ava felt like an imposter dressed up for a gala. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, that safe hairstyle that made her feel less exposed. Daphne had already disappeared into the crowds, laughing loudly and charming half the room with her stories. Ava, on the other hand, stayed on the periphery of the ballroom, watching, always watching. That's when she saw her, a young woman, not much older than a teenager, standing alone near the window. She had brown hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders and wore a pearl-colored dress that made her look fragile, almost ethereal. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Ava's attention, it was her body language. The slightly curved shoulders, the nervously clasped hands, the lost gaze that swept across the room without really connecting with anyone. Ava knew that look. It belonged to someone who was there, but at the same time very, very far away. Something inside her, that empathy that had always been both her blessing and her curse, pulled her toward the girl. Without thinking too much, without calculating, just feeling. When Ava approached, the young woman looked at her with a mixture of surprise and caution. Ava smiled in that gentle way she had and waved slowly. The girl blinked, confused for a moment, until Ava realized she wasn't hearing, not the way others heard. Intuition confirmed what her eyes already knew, so Ava did something simple but profound. She brought her hand to her chest and carefully mouthed her own name, then gestured gently toward the young woman, as if asking without pressure. The girl's eyes lit up. She brought her hand to her own chest and with her lips formed the name Lillian. And in that instant, without a single word spoken aloud, two souls recognized each other.
Across the ballroom, Roman Barker was watching it all with an attention he hadn't expected to give. He was used to events like this. He knew how to smile at the right moment, shake the right hands, say the right words. Control was his unofficial middle name. But something about that scene completely disarmed him. Seeing his sister, Lillian, smile for real, not that polite smile she used to please people, but a genuine smile full of relief, was rare. And the woman responsible for it? He didn't know her. Didn't know her name, her story, nothing. But he knew, without a shadow of doubt, that she wasn't like the other people there. There was something in the way she moved, delicate but purposeful, as if she were offering Lillian not pity but presence. And that touched something inside Roman he thought he'd buried along with his parents. Ava continued talking with Lillian through simple gestures, facial expressions, and small comforting touches on her arm. It wasn't formal sign language, Ava didn't know ASL, but it was communication. It was connection. And Lillian seemed to blossom under that genuine attention, her shoulders relaxing, her smile expanding. They laughed together about something, and the sound of Lillian's laughter, high-pitched, spontaneous, so rare lately, cut through the ballroom like a forgotten melody. For Ava, this wasn't heroism. It was just what anyone should do. See the other person, really see them. But for Lillian, and for Roman who was still watching from afar, it was everything. "You have a special gift." The voice came from behind, deep and controlled, but with an edge of warmth that softened to corners. Ava turned and came face to face with him. Roman Barker, the CEO, the man everyone at the office spoke about in reverent whispers as if he were a walking corporate legend. He was tall, had the kind of presence that filled space effortlessly, and his eyes, gray, intense, seemed to see beyond what she showed. Ava felt her heart race but kept her composure. "Thank you," he continued, his gaze shifting between her and Lillian, "for making my sister smile like that. It doesn't happen often." Ava opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, she felt Lillian touch her arm. The young woman looked at Roman and then at Ava and made a simple gesture, pointing to her heart and then bringing her hands together, a universal gesture of gratitude. Ava's eyes filled with emotion, but she blinked quickly, not wanting it to overflow there in front of everyone. Roman extended his hand. "Roman Barker." "Ava Williams." She shook his hand, and the touch was brief, but it left a mark, as if the world had paused for just 1 second, simply so that meeting could happen. When their hands released, something remained in the air, an unasked question, an unexplored possibility.
And while the music started up again and the people around them continued their empty conversations, Ava, Roman, and Lillian remained there in a small circle of shared silence that said more than any speech ever could. Mondays had always tasted bitter to Ava, but this one was different. She arrived at the office with her heart beating in a strange rhythm, as if she were waiting for something she couldn't name. The party was behind her now. The golden ballroom, the chandeliers, the meeting with Lillian and Roman, but something from that night still pulsed inside her. Maybe it was the memory of his handshake, or the way Roman looked at her when he said thank you, as if he were seeing something in her that she didn't even see in herself. Ava shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away as she turned on her computer. It was just politeness, she murmured to herself. He's the CEO. You're you. But her stubborn heart didn't buy that logic. It didn't take long for Daphne to appear at her cubicle, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "So, you're going to pretend nothing happened at the party?" she asked, leaning against the divider with that smile that said, "I know everything." "Nothing happened," Ava replied without taking her eyes off the screen. "Oh, sure, nothing. Just you making friends with the most untouchable billionaire sister in the company, and him looking at you like he just discovered the world has colors." Ava felt her face warm. "Daphne, stop. He was just being polite." "Polite? Honey, I've seen that man. He doesn't do polite. He does business and total control. But with you, he did something that looked a lot like interest." Ava didn't respond, but her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Because deep down, she had felt it too. That look, that pause, that second where everything seemed possible. The following days were a sequence of improbable coincidences. Roman started appearing on the administrative floor with a frequency no one could explain. He said he was checking processes or monitoring the integration of new systems. But everyone knew CEOs didn't come down to handle operational details. Thomas Gray, the CFO, watched it all with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach them, like a predator sizing up prey. Ava felt the weight of that gaze, but tried to ignore it. What really unsettled her were the encounters with Roman. He would walk past her desk, stop for a few seconds, exchange a few words about work, and then just stand there, as if he wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. And Ava pretended everything was normal, but her heart raced every time she heard his footsteps echoing through the corridor. One afternoon, he stopped beside her desk with a folder in his hands, an obvious excuse. "Ava, could you review this report? I need a different perspective." She took the folder, flipping through it quickly. It was a simple report, something any senior analyst could handle. But she just nodded. Of course. Roman stood there, hands in his pockets. The silence between them was thick, loaded with unspoken things. Ava could feel her coworkers' eyes on them, the silent buzz of people watching without seeming to watch. Finally, he spoke. "Lillian asked about you." Ava looked up surprised. "She did?" She won't stop talking about the kind woman from the party. She wanted to know if... He hesitated, and for the first time Ava saw a crack in his armor of control. "If you'd like to visit her sometime. To talk. In your way." The invitation came disguised as a request for his sister, but Ava sensed there was something more. There was a desire from him, too, hidden between the lines. She bit her lip, thinking. All the rational voices in her mind were screaming, "Don't get involved, don't cross that line, you know where this could end." But her heart, that stubborn, vulnerable heart, whispered something else. "I'd love to." And she saw relief wash over his eyes like a wave. "How about Saturday? I can pick you up." His voice was soft now, almost intimate. "I know a quiet spot near the Willamette River." And there it was. The real invitation. Not disguised, not corporate, just him and her, and the possibility of something that didn't yet have a name. Ava felt the world shrink until it fit into just that moment, his eyes on hers, the silence heavy with promises, fear and desire dancing together inside her chest. She let down her hair that had been tied back, an unconscious gesture, and she saw his eyes followed the movement. "Saturday works?" she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Roman smiled. It wasn't the corporate smile he used in meetings. It was something real, something that showed the man behind the CEO. And when he walked away, taking with him that subtle scent of wood and mint, Ava stayed there, heart pounding hard, knowing something had changed. Daphne appeared seconds later, eyes wide. "Oh my God, did you just make a date with Roman Barker?" Ava didn't answer. She just stared at her computer screen where the words no longer made any sense, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about what she should do. She was just feeling. And what she felt was something dangerous, powerful, impossible to ignore. It was passion still asleep, but about to wake up.
Saturday arrived, bringing with it a cotton sky, that kind of afternoon when Portland looks like a faded painting, all made of soft grays and deep greens. Ava changed her clothes 3 times before settling on something simple. Jeans, a white long-sleeved blouse, and a light jacket. She left her hair down, and this time it wasn't an accident. It was a choice. When Roman rang the doorbell, she took a deep breath, counted to 3, and opened the door. He was there, casual but impeccable, in a brown leather jacket over a black t-shirt, and that gaze that always seemed to search for something beneath the surface. When he smiled, something inside her calmed down and sped up at the same time. "You look beautiful," he said, and it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like truth. They drove to the banks of the Willamette River in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled with empty words. The city fell away as the landscape opened up in shades of green and blue. Roman parked near a hidden trail, a place that seemed forgotten by time, where the water ran gently and the wind carried the smell of wet earth and leaves. They walked side by side, their steps in sync, until they reached a spot where the bank widened and they could sit on the smooth stones, watching the current. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the water wash away her thoughts. When she opened them, she found Roman already looking at her. "Do you come here often?" she asked, breaking the silence gently. "I used to, when my parents were alive." His voice carried a weight that made Ava turn her face completely toward him. Roman was looking at the river, but he was seeing something much farther away. "My father used to bring me here when I was a kid. He said rivers teach us to let go, that water always knows the way, even when it seems lost." Ava said nothing, just waited. And Roman, perhaps for the first time in years, let the words come out unfiltered. "They died in a car accident 5 years ago. I was driving." He paused, his jaw tense. "Lillian was in the back seat. She was 14. She came out alive, but she lost her hearing. And me? I lost the right to make mistakes." The confession fell between them like a stone thrown into the river, creating waves that expanded silently. Ava felt her throat tighten, but she didn't look away. She reached out her hand, slowly, and touched his, not with pity, but with understanding. Roman looked at her fingers on his, and something in the stiffness of his shoulders gave way. "How long have you been carrying this alone?" Ava asked, her voice low but steady. "Forever." He intertwined his fingers with hers, like someone holding onto an anchor. "Lillian is all I have left, and I swore I'd never let anything hurt her again. Not even me."
Ava understood then. She understood the distance he kept from everything and everyone, the armor of control, the fear disguised as responsibility. And she also understood that this man, so used to protecting, had never allowed anyone to protect him in return. She squeezed his hand tighter. "You know it wasn't your fault, right?" The words came out simple, but loaded with a tenderness Roman hadn't expected. "Accidents happen, and Lillian, she doesn't blame you. I saw it in her eyes. She loves you.
and real love doesn't hold grudges. Roman turned to her, and for the first time, Ava saw tears in the corners of those gray eyes. He didn't let them fall, but they were there, suspended like promises of vulnerability. He brought his free hand to her face, brushing away a strand of hair the wind had brought, and his fingers lingered longer than necessary against her skin. "And you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What is it that you carry alone?" Ava hadn't expected the question, but felt it deserved an honest answer. She looked at the river, at the water that followed its relentless path, carrying with it dry leaves and pieces of broken branches. "I carry the fear of not being enough," she confessed, "of always being there but never really seen, of loving and not being loved back. So I hide. I pretend everything's fine, that I don't need anyone. But the truth?" She looked back at him, her eyes glistening. "The truth is, I'm tired of hiding." Roman pulled her closer, and Ava let him. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heart beat strongly against her ear. They stayed like that, embraced, while the river continued its journey and the world around them seemed to respect that sacred moment. There was no kiss, not yet, because what was happening there was deeper than desire. It was recognition. It was two wounded souls finding shelter in each other. But not everything is simple when it comes to love. While Ava and Roman shared their pain by the river, Lillian was at home, looking out the window, her heart tight. She had seen her brother smile when he left, that smile he hadn't given in years. And part of her was happy, but another part, the small, frightened part that still lived inside her, whispered, "What if he forgets me? What if she's more important?" The fear was irrational. Lillian knew that, but fear doesn't obey reason. And when Roman came back that night, lighter, more alive, Lillian pretended to be happy, but inside, a seed of insecurity began to grow.
The following weeks were like a waking dream. Ava and Roman saw each other whenever possible. Quick coffees during lunch breaks, messages exchanged late at night, looks that said more than any words could. He officially introduced her to Lillian, and the two created a genuine connection made of gestures, smiles, and a mutual patience rarely seen in the world. Ava learned some basic signs, and Lillian taught with enthusiasm, her eyes shining whenever Ava got it right. But there was something in the air, a subtle tension that Roman couldn't name, and that Lillian hid behind polite smiles. Until one night, everything fell apart. Ava was in Roman's apartment for the first time, helping prepare dinner while Lillian finished her homework in her room. The kitchen smelled of garlic and basil, and there was a lightness in the air that made Ava believe that, for the first time in a long time, she could belong to something bigger than herself. Roman pulled her by the waist, stealing a quick kiss that made her laugh softly. But then Lillian appeared in the doorway. Her eyes moved from Roman to Ava, and something in that look, something cold, distant, made Roman's smile disappear. Lillian made an abrupt gesture, signing something Ava didn't fully understand, but the tone was clear: frustration, hurt, jealousy. Roman tried to calm her, but Lillian had already turned and gone back to her room, slamming the door hard enough to make the pictures on the wall shake. The silence that remained was thick, heavy as lead. Ava felt her chest tighten. "I should go," she said, her voice small. "No!" Roman held her arm, gentle but firm. "It's not about you. It's about—" He stopped, running his hand through his hair, frustrated. "It's about me, about the guilt, about her fear that I'll abandon her." "But you're not abandoning her, Roman. You're just living." Ava touched his face, trying to anchor this man who seemed to be falling apart in front of her. "You have a right to that." Roman closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was a decision there that Ava didn't like seeing. "I need to fix this. I need to make sure she's okay. Always." "I know, and I understand. But Roman—" Ava took a deep breath, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. "Don't push me away, please." He kissed her, slowly, deeply, like someone trying to memorize something they fear losing. and when he pulled away, there was a sadness in his eyes that broke Ava in half. "I just need some time," he murmured, "to put things in place."
But some time turned into days. Days turned into weeks. The messages stopped coming. The glances in the office hallway, when they happened, were brief, almost formal. Roman closed himself off again, returning to that armored version of himself that Ava had first seen at the party. And her? She pretended everything was fine during the day, but at night, in the silence of her apartment, she pulled her hair back tightly and cried, because she knew she had lost something precious before even fully having it. Daphne tried to cheer her up, bringing chocolates, cheap wine, and bad jokes. But Ava was in a place that laughter couldn't reach. She began to question whether it had all been an illusion, whether the love she felt was real or just a reflection of what she so desperately wanted to believe. The pain wasn't dramatic. It was silent, constant, like a fine rain that soaks you gradually. Until one day, Ava made a decision. If he couldn't choose her, she would choose herself. She submitted her resignation. "Are you sure about this?" Daphne asked, eyes wide with concern. "I am," Ava replied, and for the first time in weeks, there was firmness in her voice. "I can't stay here, pretending everything's fine, running into him and feeling my heart break a little more each day. I deserve more than that." Thomas Gray, the CFO, accepted the resignation with a smile that didn't fit the situation, as if he had won a silent battle. He never liked the closeness between Ava and Roman, seeing her as a threat to the influence he wielded over company decisions. To him, her departure was convenient, but for Roman, it was a punch to the gut. By the time he found out, it was too late. Ava had cleared her desk, returned her badge, and left without looking back. Meanwhile, at home, Lillian watched her brother consume himself in silence. She saw the sadness in his eyes, the way he looked at his phone, waiting for messages that didn't come, the way he sighed deeply before pretending everything was fine. And then Lillian understood. She understood that her fear, the fear of being left behind, had done exactly what she feared most. It had driven away the only person who had made Roman come back to life. And in that painful understanding, Lillian made her own decision. She needed to fix what she had broken, because true love doesn't cage. True love sets free. Rain beat against the window of Ava's apartment as she packed her last belongings. Portland had always been a city of wet goodbyes. She looked around at that space that had been her refuge and felt a mixture of relief and emptiness. But deep down, very deep down, a part of her still hoped the door would ring, that he would show up, that he would say he had chosen wrong. But the door remained closed, and Ava, for the first time, accepted that maybe some love stories weren't meant to have happy endings. At least not yet.
6 months. Half a year had passed since Ava left that company, that life, that love that still hurt when she allowed it to hurt. She had found a new job at a small publishing house, a quiet place, full of books and people who spoke softly where nobody knew her story. Rebuilding hadn't been easy. There were nights when she almost picked up the phone, almost sent that message, almost gave in to the longing that kept knocking at her door. But she didn't give in. Because Ava had learned something fundamental in those months of silence, that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. And she had chosen to survive, even if it hurt. Daphne kept showing up, bringing news from the corporate world Ava had left behind, but she asked, always gently, that she not mention Roman, and Daphne respected that. Until that day. "Ava, I know you asked me not to talk about him, but..." Daphne paused, biting her lip like someone carrying something too important to keep. "There's a charity event for the company on Friday, to raise funds for deaf children. Lillian's going to be there, and so is he." Ava felt her heart skip a beat, but kept her expression neutral. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because an invitation came for you." Daphne pulled a cream-colored envelope from her purse, extending it like someone offering a second chance wrapped in fine paper.
with Lillian's name on the return address. Ava took the envelope with imperceptibly trembling hands. Inside, along with the formal invitation, was a handwritten note in Lillian's delicate, hesitant handwriting. "Please come. I need you to be here. I ruined everything and I want to fix it. You taught me that silence can be kind, not empty. Now I want you to hear the silence that should have always existed between you and my brother, the silence of two people who love each other and aren't afraid of it. With love, Lillian." The tears came before Ava could stop them. Daphne moved closer, pulling her into a tight hug. "Are you going?" she asked softly. Ava wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, let down her hair that had been tied back. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. "I'm going." The night of the event had a serene beauty. The ballroom was decorated with soft lights and white flower arrangements, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a dream than a corporate gala. There was live music, a string quartet playing melodies that filled the space with an almost tangible emotion. Ava entered wearing an emerald green dress that Daphne insisted she buy, her hair falling in natural waves over her shoulders. She felt different. No longer the invisible observer, but someone who had walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. Her eyes swept the ballroom, searching without meaning to, until they found her. Lillian. The young woman was at the center of a circle of people, smiling and interacting with a confidence Ava hadn't seen before. She had grown, not just in height, but in presence. When Lillian saw her, her face lit up in a way that made Ava's heart squeeze. Lillian crossed the ballroom practically running, and when she got close, she didn't hesitate. She pulled Ava into a hug so strong, so genuine, that Ava felt all the hurt from those months dissolving like salt in water. When they pulled apart, Lillian made a simple sign, bringing her hand to her heart and then pointing to Ava, an apology and a declaration of love at the same time. Ava smiled, wiping away a tear that escaped, and responded with the same gesture. And it was in that moment that she saw him.
Roman was standing on the other side of the ballroom, but his eyes were fixed on her as if the rest of the world had disappeared. He looked different too. Thinner, maybe. There was a vulnerability in him that didn't exist before, as if the months of distance had broken down the last barriers he still maintained. He started walking toward her, slowly, like someone who fears a sudden movement will make the mirage disappear. Ava stayed where she was, her heart beating so hard she was certain everyone around could hear it. When he stopped in front of her, the entire world went silent. Not the empty silence, the full silence. The silence where everything that matters lives. "Ava." His voice came out hoarse, loaded with everything he hadn't said during those months. "I was a coward." She didn't respond, just waited. Let him say what he needed to say. "I thought protecting Lillian meant staying away from you, but what I did was hurt us, all of us." He glanced quickly at his sister, who was watching the scene from afar with an encouraging smile, then returned his eyes to Ava. "Lillian made me understand something I should have known from the beginning, that love doesn't divide, it multiplies, and that I wasn't protecting her by pushing you away. I was just afraid of being happy, afraid that if I loved you completely, the universe would take you from me too." Ava felt her throat tighten, but kept her gaze steady. "And now?" she asked, her voice low but strong. "Are you still afraid?" Roman took a step forward, taking her hands in his. "I'm terrified," he confessed, and for the first time he smiled, that real, vulnerable human smile. "But I learned that fear doesn't disappear. We just choose what's more important. And you, Ava, you're the most important thing that's ever happened in my life. You showed me that real love doesn't cage. It awakens what was sleeping in us, and I spent 6 months asleep. I don't want that anymore." The people around them began to notice what was happening. The ballroom grew quieter, all eyes converging on that moment. But Ava and Roman didn't notice. They were in their own world, a world made of second chances and courage. "I was afraid too," Ava confessed, squeezing his hands. afraid of not being enough, that my love wouldn't be enough for you to choose. But I learned something too. I learned that I don't need to be chosen to have value. I already have value, on my own. Roman nodded, his eyes shining. I know, and that's why I'm not here to complete you. I'm here to walk beside you, if you'll let me. Ava looked at him, at this man who had broken her heart and was now standing there, stripped of all defenses, offering his own heart back, and she realized something fundamental. True love isn't the kind that never makes mistakes. It's the kind that after making mistakes finds its way back, with humility, with truth, with surrender. I want that, she whispered. And he kissed her, there in the middle of the ballroom, under the soft lights and everyone's eyes. It was a kiss that sealed not an ending, but a new beginning. A kiss that said, I choose you today and always, with all the fears and all the imperfections. When they pulled apart, Lillian was crying with joy. Daphne was applauding discreetly, and even Thomas Gray, watching from afar, had to admit, albeit reluctantly, that there was something undeniably powerful about that love. Ava and Roman were no longer two people trying to fit together. They were two whole people choosing to walk together. And the silence between them? It was no longer a void to be filled. It was the sacred space where love had finally learned to live.
Sometimes, life teaches us that true love isn't the kind that comes easy, but the kind that remains even when everything seems lost. The story of Ava and Roman shows us that passion isn't just the initial fire that ignites two hearts, it's also the constant flame we choose to feed every day, even when the wind blows hard and threatens to extinguish it. They learned, each in their own way, that the desire to be loved only becomes real when we have the courage to love back, without fear, without reservations, without the armor we build to protect ourselves from pain. And we who witness this journey are reminded that it's never too late to start over, to let down the hair we tied back out of insecurity, to allow someone to see us, truly see us, and still choose to stay. Just as Ava discovered that love can transform everything, each of us also carries that power of transformation within. We don't need to be perfect to deserve affection. We don't need to have all the answers to surrender to connection. We just need to have the courage to be vulnerable, to admit that we need, to accept that tenderness isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength that exists. Roman understood that protecting those we love doesn't mean pushing them away, but rather walking beside them, allowing love to expand instead of contract. And Lillian, sweet Lillian, taught us that silence can be the most eloquent of languages when filled with genuine love. Each of them had to face their own fears, their own shadows, to finally find the light that was always there, waiting patiently. Stories like this remind us that romance doesn't live only in grand gestures, but in the small moments of conscious choice. It lives in the gaze that crosses the crowded ballroom. It lives in the hand that holds on when everything seems to crumble. It lives in the forgiveness we offer ourselves and others when we make mistakes. The longing for connection is universal, but the surrender is personal and courageous. Ava and Roman didn't find a perfect ending because perfect endings don't exist. They found an honest new beginning built on the foundation of acknowledged mistakes and learned lessons. And that, in the end, is far more precious than any fairy tale. If this story touched you in some way, if it awakened something inside your heart that perhaps was sleeping, write in the comments, "Love transforms lives." We want to hear your voice, to know that these words found a home in your heart. Tell us too, have you ever lived a love that needed to be rebuilt? Have you ever had to choose between fear and courage? Share your story with us, because every narrative matters, every journey has value, And together, we form a community that believes in the redeeming power of true love. Subscribe to Eternal Romance Stories and experience with each episode emotions that warm the soul and reflections that transform the heart. Here, you'll find stories that not only entertain, but also inspire, heal, and remind you that it's always worth believing in love, even when it scares us, even when it challenges us, even when it asks us to be braver than we thought we could be. Every story we tell is an invitation for you to reconnect with what makes you human, the infinite capacity to love and be loved. And this was just one of many stories that will still move you here, because love, in all its forms and manifestations, never stops surprising us. It's always finding new paths, new voices, new hearts to touch, and we'll be here, telling each of those stories, hoping they find you exactly when you need to hear them most. Until the next journey, until the next breath, until the next heart that opens to the impossible and discovers that in the end, love was always possible, always real, always yours.